So today I want to talk to you a little bit about divorce. Divorce is so common nowadays that I think it is a issue that is often overlooked because over half of marriages end in divorce at this point. That I think oftentimes when we have kids that are really deeply affected by divorce in their families, we sometimes don't understand. Why are they affected and our neighbor kid is fine? This is so normal. Why are you having a reaction? I think it can be really hard to understand the devastating effects that divorce has on some kids. And the truth is that not every kid is going to be negatively affected by divorce, but a lot are. And it's a common suffering that we just have kind of lost touch with since, again, like I said, it's become the norm in a lot of ways and it's been so common. While some parents might think and hope that their conflicting or negative behavior may have little impact on the child, our clinical experience with these children reveals heartfelt sensitivity and anguish that the child may feel. Oftentimes the parents are fighting in court, or maybe they're just have been really hurt and damaged by a dysfunctional marriage themselves. And even the best parent, trying not to say anything negative about the other parent, will sometimes slip and say something really negative. When a child hears something negative about either parent, even if it's true, and sometimes especially if it's true, this can hurt their feelings because they feel like it's a reflection on them. So if you say something bad about dad, I feel like that is something bad about me because I'm half his, and vice versa. The psychological risk to be is approximately 2 times greater for children of divorced families compared to children of intact families. So psychological risk means that they're more prone to mood disorders, negative behaviors, poor coping skills, and just overall some sort of psychological disability or negative impact. And so the 2 times greater for children of divorce is a huge effect. And again, like I said, it's really easy since it's so common just to think that this is what happens nowadays and we all have to adjust and move on. And there's some truth to that, but kids oftentimes need way more support to integrate all of their feelings and emotions around a divorce. About 10% of children in married families had serious psychological and social problems compared to 20 to 25% of children from divorced families. So here are some of the short and long-term effects of divorce on children. The initial period of separation is immensely stressful for the majority of children and adolescents, particularly due to the fact that most children are uninformed by their parents about the separation or divorce. Oftentimes, parents don't know what to say and what not to say. They want to protect their children from their adult problems, but oftentimes don't tell, especially their teenager, what's really going on and maybe even how they feel. So risking that vulnerability of talking to your kid about how you feel. It's hard to tell your child that you're having a hard time because you feel like you've failed on some level. Or maybe it's even harder to say that you feel relieved and you're sorry that you're not being as compassionate as maybe you could be towards their feelings because yours are so different. When we're honest and vulnerable about our feelings and not necessarily about our thoughts and opinions, we open up a space that our child will also feel comfortable to share what's going on with them emotionally. A large number of children are unprepared for their parents' separation and react with an acute, intense sense of shock, disbelief, distress, sorrow, anxiety, and anger. Oftentimes, your child's whole world is thrown off. They may have to move, or they don't know where they're going to live, if they're going to live in the same school district and have the same friends, if one parent is going to leave and not see them. And oftentimes, children have a hard time, and teenagers have a hard time telling you what exactly their fears are, because there's so many, and they're all at once. And some of the ones that seem very trivial, or maybe they're afraid to share, but are what's most important to them. So preschool children can experience regression, intensified anxiety, fears and neediness, sleep disturbance, and increased aggression. In middle school, you'll see anxiety, loneliness, and a sense of powerlessness. They may also struggle with feelings of responsibility for the divorce, conflicts of loyalty between parents, and have fantasies of reconciliation. Their school performance and peer relationships may also be negatively affected. And adolescents may experience acute depression, intense anger, and anxiety about their own future relationships. They may also withdraw socially and accelerate their separation and individuation process from the family. So teenagers, oftentimes when there's a divorce going on, are just in a hurry to separate from their families, spend more time with their friends. They have more anxiety around dating relationships because this is that age that most children start to become concerned with their friends and dating relationships. This can also, if divorce happens in this time, this can throw them further into an anxiety about relationships in general. You can imagine, and why I added in the extra age, even though like our kids here at ERA are teenagers, is that oftentimes when there's a divorce, you may have, 2, 3, 4 different age children in your home, all experiencing different types of symptoms, different types of feelings. So you may have a middle school child who is struggling with who do they align themselves with. Are they on dad's team? Are they on mom's team? Feeling like they have to choose a side. And you may have an older teenager who's not spending any time with either parent because they just want to hurry up and get out of the home. You could see how those younger children might have a difficult time understanding where their older sibling went or what happened. It's important to remember this acute response diminishes or disappears over a period of 1 to 2 years. Interestingly, the initial response of children do not necessarily predict the longer-term consequences for psychological adjustment. So if you've recently got divorced and you have a child who's acting out and having a really challenging time, that does not mean that they're going to have psychological problems that follow them into adulthood. Sometimes it's the child who seems to be totally well adjusted, who is just simply avoiding their feelings that will later on have to deal with some of these psychological factors. The longer-term consequences. Children of divorce are significantly more likely to have externalizing problems such as conduct disorder and antisocial behaviors, relationship problems with peers, parents, and authority figures, academic problems, and internalizing symptoms such as depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. What I've seen in my clinical practice is that oftentimes these kids that are having symptoms are ignored initially because parents themselves are grieving and suffering and going through their own pain of the divorce. Oftentimes they feel like the children will outgrow it, or they simply don't notice at all. Other potentially long-term negative effects of divorce include significant decline in the economic stability of their family and the loss of an important relationship with close friends and extended family members, including non-resident parents who are typically the fathers. As young adults, these children are at risk for weaker marital relationships, earlier pregnancy, and lower socioeconomic attainment. The psychological impact of the divorce of any individual child is dependent on a number of risk and protective factors. High levels of conflict, whether in the conflict of marriage or in high conflict divorce situations, appear to have an especially negative influence on the psychological adjustment of children. And I can tell you that in my clinical practice, and even here at Eagle Ranch, when families begin to communicate, work together, and spend time with their children when they can as an entire unit. Even divorced parents who come together for a meal, come together for a seminar, come together for family therapy calls, this can significantly reduce those negative psychological consequences in your child. Protective factors include a good relationship with at least one parent or caregiver, parental warmth, and the support of siblings and peers. Oftentimes in divorce, we forget about the sibling relationship. And like I said, siblings can handle divorce, internalize and externalize divorce in a number of different ways. And their relationships are often strained in the divorce. So it is important to not only think about that specific child, but how they are relating, getting along with their siblings. Interparental conflict, the psychological health of the parents, and the quality of the parent-child relationship appear to be among the most important predictors of a child's adjustment to divorce. A role for child psychology and allied disciplines. In this regard, the knowledge of how divorce affects children and parents should be disseminated not only among mental health professionals, but also among professionals who work with children. Teachers, for example, need to be alerted to these findings so they can be sensitive to any changes in the children's behavior and offer them and their parents support and counsel about ways they can cope with the changes in their lives. Something that happens during divorce is that oftentimes parents feel ashamed. They don't really want their family business out there in the world for everyone else to know. We can completely understand this. However, if you have a child who is suffering or acting out, it is important that you have the humility and courage it takes to talk to the teachers, counselors, even some of the family friends or parents of your child's friends, just to fill them in and make sure that your child has a team of support around them. Psychological support for parents and children should be available immediately when divorce begins. The do's and don'ts of divorce. The do's. Do love your children as much as possible. Show your love through words and actions. Do tell your children that divorce is not their fault. Tell your children this often. They need to hear it more than once. Do reassure your children that they will be safe, and let them know both parents will continue to provide for them to the best of their ability. Do let your children know it's okay to love both mom and dad as they did before the divorce. And it's equally as important as new spouses, girlfriends, partners come into the picture to also say that it's fine for them to care and love these other adult figures as well. Do listen to your children. Honor their feelings without judging, fixing, or trying to change how they feel. Remember, your children's feelings don't have to reflect your own feelings. Do let your children know it's okay to express those feelings. Remember, your children will need help learning safe and healthy ways to express their feelings. Be sure to provide them with appropriate options. Do reinforce that children are members of two homes. Children should not be made to feel guilty or as if they have to choose between their real home or a better home, or that they have to pick sides in a battle or a war. Do provide your children with discipline as well as love. Children still need parents to provide structure and limits, especially during difficult times. Here are some of the don'ts. Don't badmouth, judge, or criticize your child's other parent. Don't expose your children to the divorce details. Rarely is it ever in the best interest of children to expose information regarding court matters, child support, financial concerns, or intimate details regarding your divorce. Typically, children feel very confused and caught in the middle when parents expose them to adult issues. However, when you're dealing with a teenager, things can be a little bit different than a younger child. And if both parents could be open and honest with the child, especially being a team and understanding, talking to their children about some real issues that affect the child directly, when they're in adolescence, this makes them feel more powerful, makes them feel like their voice is heard, and that their parents do not think that they're naive. If you can do this in a healthy way, it can be extremely powerful, but be warned that a lot of times in the situations of divorce, parents aren't ready to communicate in that healthy way, and it may be the task of a mediator or a counselor to help you as a family work through some of these issues with your adolescent. Don't use your children as messengers or spies. It's really easy to ask your child information about your ex-spouse, or maybe their new girlfriend or their new boyfriend, or what's happening with the money, or if they bought a new car, or all of those things that we're curious about. It is okay to be curious. It's not okay to ask your child to find out that information. Don't retaliate when the other parent says or does damaging things. In divorce, you can really only control your side of the street and your own behavior. So as much as I'm reading these don'ts, I am aware that sometimes we'll have a divorce situation where one parent is trying to make all the right decision and the other parent is falling into a lot of the don'ts. If you're the parent who's taking the higher ground, then don't retaliate or act out or justify your own bad behavior by the other parent's bad behavior. Make sure that you have integrity in what you're doing and your choices. This will give your child a role model of how to do it. Don't make your children responsible for making adult decisions. Children should not be placed in the position of deciding parenting schedules, where they will live, or how to handle household matters. I think oftentimes children are asked, where do you want to live? What school do you want to go to? It's important that you get their input, that you know what they want, but that at the end of the day, adult decisions are adult decisions. You can consider their opinions and what they want, but the second that they think they are in charge of those decisions, they lose respect for the authority in their home, and they also feel a sense of deep fear because they're too young to be in control of their lives in that way without the support of their parents. Don't allow your children to become your best friends or confidants. Children should not feel responsible for their parents' emotional well-being. Make sure you develop a supportive network and find other caring adults to share your feelings with about the divorce. Some families that have gone through divorce report that going to a divorce support group or going to their own therapist has been extremely helpful for them to process their own emotions so that they don't end up processing their emotions with their kids. A lot of times with teenagers, even teenagers that are functioning fairly well, it's tempting to talk to them like they are adults, but they are not quite there yet, and it's important to safeguard them and remain in that parental role. Don't withhold visitation if child support is unpaid or fail to pay child support if the other parent is withholding visitation. Both actions are illegal and are viewed as separate issues by the court. It's really easy to get into these battles with your ex. If you can avoid the battles, choose the ones that are really important and consult with people who are loving and caring and perhaps a counselor of your own. That will help safeguard you from getting into little power struggles with your ex that will upset your family that much further. Don't try to buy your child's love or buy the other parent. While children enjoy gifts, they will remember you for how you cherish them, not for the material things you bought them. There is a tendency when divorce happens to want to be the best parent there is, to be the superhero parent, the parent who goes to Disneyland, spends all the money, buys all the things, says yes. This can be particularly dangerous for your teenager who is needing you to show them structure, guidelines, and to be the parent. You don't want to be the fun parent, and then when your child gets involved in drugs, you have no influence or power over their choices because they no longer trust you and you're just the fun parent or you're the friend. Remember that you want to be able to use that parent-adult card when your child is suffering or making bad choices. Don't lose your sense of humor. It comes in handy during stressful times. As people are going through divorce, every single person in the family is experiencing a high level of stress. So if you understand that everyone in the family is experiencing a high level of stress, try to be patient with yourself and with others and to find happiness in the times that it's available. What I hear from the teens that I work with is that the most meaningful things for them are family dinners after the parents got divorced, times that the parents got together, when they could share Thanksgiving, when they could share a Sunday meal, when they could come together for graduations or birthdays. I know this isn't always possible, but if it is, even if you're faking it a little bit, it can be extremely helpful for your child. Tell your children that the divorce is not their fault, just reiterating this to them. Tell your children that you love them. Reinforce it is okay to love everyone in the family. I think one of the main things that you can do as an adult while you're coping with your divorce is to develop good coping mechanisms yourself, because you need to teach your children when they're going through stressful times, which will inevitably happen during adolescence and for the rest of their life. This divorce is an opportunity for you to show your children that it's okay to use these different coping mechanisms to support yourself. If you are drinking, acting out, staying out late, giving up on your responsibilities, blaming other people, bad talking other people, or some of the behaviors that our kids are here at ERA for. Substance abuse, promiscuity, acting out, all of those things can happen when people go through a divorce. Oftentimes they revert back to an adolescent stage themselves. So just be aware of your own coping mechanisms. If you don't have a lot of good, healthy coping mechanisms, find someone, a professional that can help teach you those. Because your children, especially your adolescents, are watching what you do, not what you say. They will hold you accountable for every hypocritical decision or move that you make. So just be aware that teenagers especially are extremely aware of what you're doing. Just like you're watching them, they're watching you. Another issue I just want to touch on briefly is that dating again can often lead to a distraction from the needs of your children. So even though it can be an exciting time when you start to feel a little better after your divorce and start dating again, it can be exciting and distracting. It's important to just remind yourself that your children need you more than ever, and that when you start dating again, often lots of feelings of insecurity, fear, and old resentments from the divorce come up in your child. They may or may not be able to express this to you, but it is most often there. Even if it doesn't cause negative psychological consequences right away, they need to know that you're being attentive, not just to your own feelings, but to theirs as well.